Here are 9 things that every Aspie should know about masking. Now, when we talk about masking, I think most people have a general idea of what it is, but from a more technical perspective. What exactly is masking? Let's answer that question. It is, or it can be defined as concealing one's emotion by presenting another emotion. Okay, think of an actor on the stage or on the screen. They're effectively masking, but it goes a little bit deeper than just pretending. Colloquially, we understand masking as being changing your personality, not just your emotions, but your personality presentation for the purpose of gaining social acceptance. When first studied, researchers wondered why people acted disgusted, but then they would not act disgusted when they really were disgusted. Okay, think, for example, of you're a guest at a friend's home, maybe a relative, and they serve dinner, and there's something you're expected to eat, and it tastes disgusting. Maybe you have been there, but you pretend that you're not disgusted because you're being polite. Well, I guess in a sense that would be a type of masking, as originally they began to study it. Then they expanded their study to all facial expressions. Why do we... And humans communicate not only verbally, but through facial communication, facial expressions. And so they wondered, why is it that so often humans will make faces, facial expressions, that communicate something different than what they are truly, really feeling. So you may smile, act happy when you're sad, or vice versa, whatever. Why do we do that? So that was the original idea behind masking. So that makes sense because it has to do with the face. It's like a mask that you put over your face. But now it's understood to mean basically anything that has anything to do with your personality. And specifically, we'll dig into this a little bit more, but to gain social acceptance. Number 2, what are some examples of masking? I've got a few listed here. Number 1 is hiding stimming. You know what stimming is, that's self-stimulation. Number 2, pretending to ignore sensory discomfort. I know that I am bothered particularly by lights and by noise. I don't like to be in a crowd. I don't know about you, but I don't like to be in a crowd when everybody is talking at once. Just people having a conversation, but that drives me crazy. It doesn't seem to bother anyone else. Number 3, minimizing personal interest. Even though you may have an interest in that, you're going to not talk about it because you know that annoys people when you just ramble on and on about something. Mimicking gestures or facial expressions. I get a problem with that, and many Aspies do, because we have what is called a flat expression, or other people might call it a poker face. And so we have to intentionally express ourselves visually through facial expressions. I still don't do it very much, so that's not a problem for me. I'm not sure it's even a problem if you do it. But it's something that I don't do much. Maybe you do. You can let me know in the comments, how do you mask, and some of the things that are more typical for you. Making eye contact, or faking, we should say, eye contact. I don't like to look people in the eye, but I've learned to do it because it's courteous. And sometimes I won't look them in the eye, sometimes I'll look them in the forehead. Naturally, Aspies tend to look people in the mouth because that's what's moving. That's where the noise is coming from. That's where the communication is. That's the source of the communication, primary source. Will the eyes also communicate? But primarily, it's the words that they say. Now, some people say that the eyes are windows of the soul. I beg to differ. If you want to believe that, who cares? But, from the abundance of a heart, the mouth speaketh, and you judge a person based on their actions, not on their outward expression. So that's got nothing to do with anything, but my opinion is windows are not, or eyes rather, are not windows to the soul, but the words that you say and your actions are the windows to your soul. So if your actions don't seem to be, and your behavior doesn't seem to be, and if your personality doesn't seem to be in sync with everyone else, well, we'll try to mask what we're doing and try to be in sync with everyone else. Number 3 is this. Well, why do we do this? It seems that we are hardwired to mask. Areas of our brain that are called the dorsolateral, prefrontal cortex, and the ventromedial prefrontal cortex regulate our emotional responses, our self-control. Some people call this executive function. All right. There is this guy, I'm trying to think, it's Phineas Gage. I've got it in the notes here. Phineas Gage, back in the 19th century, was working on a railroad. And I guess he was a supervisor, manager, whatever, and there was an explosion, a controlled explosion. Well, obviously it wasn't very controlled, but it was supposed to be a controlled explosion. And it sent a spike through his head. Now, he survived, but besides the physical, biological changes that were obvious, what about his personality changes caused by the spike going through his head? That was very obvious, because this otherwise centered, mild-mannered man became obnoxious from reports, and that was the catalyst, the seminal event that started the study of human behavior and what parts of the brain are related to certain behaviors. And because that spike went through what we call the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, the assumption was made that there's something in that section of our brain, that part of our brain, that controls our behavior. So maybe, just maybe, and I don't know this, but maybe the reason Aspies in particular mask is because that area of our brain is not quite the same as the neurotypical people. So we just ask that question, we don't make a statement, but is it possible that it's different? Is it conceivably possible? And obviously there is something different, and I'm guessing that's where it is. Number 4, does masking hide our disabilities? That's actually a bit of a trick question. Do you believe that Asperger syndrome is a disability? Well, if you are unable to do something because of Asperger syndrome, because you're an Aspie, then I would say, yeah, it's a disability. If you're unable, you're disabled, if you're unable to do something. But using that definition comes with a problem, because every human being alive is unable to do something. In fact, we're unable to do many things. I am unable to run 50 miles an hour. So I guess you could say I'm disabled. But usually when we think of disability, we think not in those terms, but we think in terms of somebody who once had the ability and then lost it. So now they are disabled. Well, in that definition, then no, we're not disabled because we never had the ability in the first place. But then again, somebody who is born quadriplegic would be considered disabled. They never did have it. So how do you define disabled? But generally speaking, I would say, my opinion, you can have a different opinion, that's fine, but I would say that Asperger syndrome, autism, that part of the autism spectrum, is not a disability. In fact, a lot of times it is an ability, but it depends on how you define disability. Number 5 is this. Who masks? The answer is everybody. 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 Have you ever gone to a formal dinner and you notice the people are eating their fried chicken with their silverware? Why do they do that? Well, to be socially accepted. That's not their normal behavior, I guarantee you. Okay, there may be some people. I know folks in Europe prefer to use tableware, silverware, instead of their fingers. They eat all kinds of things with their silverware. They eat a banana with their silverware, some of them. But in the USA, we tend to eat particularly fried chicken and pizza. That is finger food. We eat it with our fingers. But if you're in a proper environment, I don't eat pizza with my fingers. I use a knife and fork because I think it's messy. But in a proper environment, we will change our behavior, our natural behavior. So in a sense, that's kind of masking. So who masks? Well, I think everyone does, but I also believe from observation and from what I've read and studied that Aspies may be more prone to masking. So everybody masks at a formal dinner, or almost everybody does. They don't dress the way they normally do. They don't behave the way they normally do. They're masking. It's a put on. And it's proper. And it's socially acceptable. And that's why they do it, is to be socially accepted. To be accepted by their peers, everyone around them. So yeah, who masks? Everyone does, but it's more pronounced. It seems to be far more pronounced in people with Asperger syndrome than neurotypical people. What dictates your mask? Answer: environment dictates your mask. Social expectations within the environment, like the formal dinner, dictates social exceptions. There should be expectations, not exceptions. Dictate what mask we wear. Now, what if, and most people just naturally know what mask to put on, how to behave. The problem with people with Asperger syndrome, we don't know. We just don't know. I don't know why. Maybe it's that part of our brain that we mentioned earlier that is disabled. Don't know. So we have to learn what mask we are to put on, and when there are literally, well, basically an infinite number of masks, that is a very daunting task. But for example, you go to school, you don't wear a swimsuit. Unless you're going to swimming school, obviously, then it may be okay. So there's such a thing as wearing appropriate clothing. Now, I'm old enough to remember, and some of you watching are, when it was appropriate to dress up. I was going to call it church clothes, but they don't even wear church clothes to church anymore. But it was appropriate to dress up when you flew on an airplane. And somebody somewhere at some point said, you know, this is real. We're sitting in this airplane for hours on end. It's really uncomfortable. So that went out the window. When I was growing up, men wore suits and hats when they went to church. And women dressed up when they went to church. I'm actually old enough when women wore these, like a net over their face. You know, what was that? I don't know. But I guess it made them look pretty, you know, mystique or something. I thought it was kind of odd. And women back then used to wear stoles. You remember stoles? A dead animal around your neck. When I was a kid, I thought that was so strange. What? And that's dressy. I mean, that's high class. But the point being, what dictates our mask is our social environment. And there was a time when going to church, you dressed up. Go to a funeral, you dressed up. Last time I went to a funeral, I was the only person there with a suit. I guess I hadn't learned yet, wearing a suit. Even the person who is deceased was not wearing a suit, which is, you know, society changes, our norms change. So what needs to be, or I should say the expectations of particular masks today may be totally different in another generation as social norms migrate. I don't want to say they evolve because that implies they're getting better, but sometimes they devolve, they go backwards. So things change. But the answer again is our environment, expectations dictate what mask we put on, and if you don't know what mask you put on, it's very difficult. That's why Aspies have a hard time. One of the reasons Aspies have a hard time keeping employment. Because they get a job, they can do the job, very well do the job, they have a good attitude, they're loyal to the company, to they follow instructions, whatever, but they don't fit in. Because everyone else has on their work mask, their work clothes, their work face, their work behavior, their work personality. And the person with Asperger syndrome doesn't get it. They may be withdrawn, very quiet, timid, inhibited, almost fearful, or they may be the opposite. Overly assertive, just won't shut up, drive people crazy. But they wind up losing their job, not because they can't do the job, but because the people they work with don't like them. That's a fact. That happens all the time. Aspies are known for having a difficult time keeping jobs for which they are eminently qualified. Very frustrating. Speaking of environment, the other day I was watching a Pentecostal church service on YouTube, and their behavior was very normal for a Pentecostal church service. Now, it probably would not go over in a liturgical church or the typical Catholic church. And as I was watching, I was thinking, why is it okay, socially accepted, for those people to behave the way they were behaving? Which it is okay. I mean, if you want to do that, if it's acceptable. They would speak in tongues. They would jump up and down. There was one guy, literally, not joking, literally was running around the inside of a church. One guy got so excited, you may have seen this video on YouTube. He actually jumped in the baptistry. That's socially accepted in that place at that time. Now you take these same people who are in that church service, take them to Walmart. They don't speak in tongues. They don't jump up and down. They don't run around the inside of Walmart. Well, maybe they do. I've never seen it. But Walmart seems to have its own culture of behavior, its own dress code, which is basically wear something, and that's the dress code. That's all that matters. Why the difference? I mean, they're the same people. You just put them in a different environment, different location, and their behavior changes to fit the environment, to do what is socially acceptable. Now that is, in a sense, masking. Masking is changing your behavior, as I understand it, changing your behavior to be socially accepted, because if you don't, it will be detrimental to you. Why do we avoid masking? Number 7. Masking can be uncomfortable for Aspies, and it can be even exhausting. Now, most people can mask, and they're fine with it. Put me in a Pentecostal church, you will not see me jumping up and down. I'm not going to jump over the pews. I'm not going to run around the inside of the church. I'm not going to speak in tongues. I'm not going to do any of those things. And it doesn't have to be a Pentecostal church. Just any church. I'm just going to stand there or sit there. Same thing with a ball game. You're not going to see me jumping up and down and cheering and carrying on like most people do, because it wears me out. Probably the same with you if you have Asperger syndrome. Now, the other element is not only is it exhausting, but it makes us feel hypocritical. It makes us feel like we're faking it. And we are faking it. But that bothers us. I guess most people don't mind faking it because everybody else is faking it, and faking it is acceptable. I don't want to fake it. I just want to be me, you know. Wherever I go, whatever I do, I want to eat my chicken with my fingers. Can't do that, and I want to eat my pizza with a knife and fork. I don't care what everyone else is doing. I don't want that gunk all over my fingers. It makes me uncomfortable. So why do we avoid masking? Because it makes us feel uncomfortable, exhausted, and makes us feel like hypocrites. Number 8, is it okay to mask? Well, again, that is contingent upon circumstances, but I would say, to a degree, not only is it okay to mask, I mean, everybody does it, but sometimes it's even beneficial, and we are encouraged to mask. Sometimes not. And I'll give you an example. Let's say, speaking of Walmart, let's say we're in Walmart and somebody, a perfect stranger, says something, hi, how you doing, whatever. And we don't want to look at them. We don't want to respond. You know, it's 3 a.m. in the morning. That's why we're at Walmart at that time of day, because we don't want to have to encounter people. But just being polite, We'll put on our friendly mask and say hello back, and may even look them in the eye. Perfectly okay. You're encouraged. At least I would encourage you to do that. Some may not. Okay, talk about church. You're in church, some guy, and if it's the first time you ever been to a church, they walk up, shake your hand, ask you your name, ask you how old you are, ask you for your social security number, ask you what you do for a living, ask you what you think of the weather. They're trying to be friendly, have a conversation, and they just drill you. I wish they wouldn't do that. Jeez. One of the reasons I don't like to go to church is they just wear you out with these questions. I hate to be rude, but it's none of your business what I do for a living or what I did for a living. But I would never tell them that, even though I'm thinking it, so I guess, okay, that's kind of a form of masking. So when people ask me, what do you do for a living, or what did you do for a living, usually my response is, well, when I was little, I wanted to grow up to be a cowboy, but Mama wouldn't let me. So is it okay to mask? I would say sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. And again, there's that social thing. But the problem with many Aspies is we are accused of being aloof, being unfriendly. And I think we can change some of that. It's not going to kill us to say hi to people when you pass them. It's not going to kill us to look somebody in the eye, at least for a second, so we don't come across as aloof. I would encourage Aspies at least a little bit to get outside your shell. For no other reason, just to be friendly. So, is it okay to mask? Sometimes it is. Sometimes it isn't. Now, another problem Aspies have when we mask is this too obvious that we're masking? And people find that as uncomfortable as if we weren't masking. And so it solves absolutely nothing. So it's contingent upon your circumstances. And then number 9 is this. Did you know there is a beverage you can drink that will remove your mask? And that is an alcoholic beverage. Totally wipes away your, maybe not totally, but wipes clean your inhibitions. The mask is gone. Now, I can tell you I'm pushing 70 years old. And throughout my entire life, I have never tasted a drop of alcohol. I have no idea what I should say alcoholic beverage. I've had cold medicine, but alcoholic beverage, never tasted it, and I plan to go to my grave unless they incinerate my body and turn me to ashes wherever I go. I plan to go having never tasted an alcoholic beverage. But the reason we even bother to bring that up is it's kind of like Phineas Gage when he had that metal rod go through his head. Alcohol is kind of like a temporary metal rod, and it has much the same effect. It takes away all those inhibitions. Now, my observation is that when that happens, it exposes your core personality. I know people, if they get intoxicated, they become depressed and weepy, and they'll sometimes break down and cry. Because I guess that's their core personality. And there are other people, when they are intoxicated, have too much to drink, they become angry. They become enraged. Now, what enrages me and makes me break down and cry at the same time is when people don't click the like button, click that thumbs up button, and then, because if you don't, I'm going to be a drunk. So you got to do that. Now, don't forget that there's absolutely, positively nothing wrong with you. The fact that you have Asperger syndrome is not a flaw. You're perfectly okay. You are normal for you. That's the way you came out. Well, that's the way you were before you came out of the womb. This is you. This is who you are. Don't be ashamed of who you are. Embrace yourself. This is not arrogance. This is not pride. This is simple, healthy self-acceptance. Be grateful for who you are. Don't have to flaunt it, but be grateful that you are the person that nature has made you to be.